Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about some guests that are invited to the White House. I already posted a story about this on blacktnews.com, but there's some drag queens that are excited to go to the White House for the signing of the Respect for Marriage Act, which has passed with bipartisan support, which some conservatives are like, aha, you guys, to all you, folks are just like, it's about just dignity and respect and just, marriage. There's all these people who are coming who are it's always about the lane further left, I suppose you could say. And I did include some quotes from like Ali Stuckley and some other folks in the article, but we're going to talk about that today. Also, I got another Fauci clip to complain about with COVID. It's like this man just won't go away. And also Ronna McDaniel, there's been some talk about the RNC chair and who's going to challenge her and if she's going to win. And I told people, said I wouldn't bet against Ronna, and Axios came out with an article yesterday talking about how it pretty much looks like she's going to take this and already pretty much has the votes for it. So we'll be talking about all those things today. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, like different articles that I have, different videos that I have. I did post one about Jennifer Lawrence, though I did talk about her live. I do also have a video about her posted. You guys can check that out at on YouTube, on Facebook, etc. I got it at all kinds of different places. And please also check out different merchandise that we have on the website, like the My Money, My Business shirt, which I made because I was sick of people talking about abortion and saying it's none of your business what I do, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, nah, it's definitely everybody's business, especially when you want taxpayer dollars involved, which is the case really with abortion, because they there's the Hyde Amendment in place. However, people like Planned Parenthood or organizations like Planned Parenthood continuously want to get rid of barriers like that. And Biden is for getting rid of barriers like that. So they want your money involved. They want you to be a participant, and it is not a private thing between a woman and her doctor, etc. So I made this shirt. Also got the Constitution is Glorious Liberty document, all kinds of different stuff you guys can get at the website. So go ahead and do that. Also, tis the season. If you got some gifts in mind for different people that I do have different books that I write. I got chapter books, I got young adult books, I got fiction books, I got 15 altogether published. If you go to blacktnews.com, hit the merchandise button, there is a banner that'll take you to my website. Otherwise, you can go to ninjadustpublishing.com. That's my book website. Or otherwise, you guys could go, here's the website, ninjadustpublishing.com. Or you guys can just look me up on Amazon. All my stuff is on Amazon. Most of the stuff is available for Kindle Unlimited if you like to read on Kindle and you have a subscription for that. Or otherwise, you guys can buy a physical copy, or you guys can get just a regular Kindle and download it that way. But either way, it's available for you if you guys are interested in that. And Also, I have my book about abortion that I will be releasing soon. I will let you guys know when it is available for pre-order. So, before we jump into it all, I would like well, I guess this meme will basically start kicking it off. So, I already showed this, but on Facebook, which this is a play off of the Matrix. If you remember the kid with the spoon, there is no spoon, kid. Um, so the important thing is to ask yourself why so many of these drag queens want an audience with the children, and it is weird for sure. And a video comes to mind that maybe you guys have seen, a bit of a drag queen complaining about this. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this video from a drag queen who said, "I don't understand why you guys want to keep doing this, why you guys want your kids around drag queens, and we are adult performers."
What in the hell has a drag queen ever done to make you have so much respect for them and admire them so much? Other than put on makeup and jump on the floor and writhe around and do sexual things on stage. I have absolutely no idea why you would want that to influence your child. Would you want a stripper or a porn star to influence your child? It makes no sense at all. A drag queen performs in a nightclub for adults. There is a lot of filth that goes on, a lot of sexual stuff that goes on. And backstage, there's a lot of nudity, sex, and drugs. Okay? So I don't think that this is an avenue you would want your child to explore. They could explore dressing up at home like we all did, like all gay boys did. We all dressed at home and we had a great time. We had a great time with our girlfriends, putting on makeup, trying on clothes, things like that. But to actually get them involved in drag is extremely, extremely irresponsible on your part. And I understand you might want to look like you're with it, that you're cool, that you're woke, that you're not a Nazi, that you're not a homophobe, whatever it may be. But you can raise your child to be just a normal, regular, everyday child without including them in gay, sexual things. And honestly, you're not doing the gay community any favors. In fact, you're hurting us, okay? We have already had a reputation of being pedophiles and being perverts and deviants. We don't need you to bring your children around. So you keep your kids at home, or take them to Disneyland, or take them to Chuck E. Cheese. But if you need your child to be entertained by a big human in a costume or in makeup, take them to the circus or something. When they turn 18, then why don't you take them to the clubs on their 18th birthday? Because it's an adult thing, okay? So don't ruin your child's life, and don't ruin us, because that's what you're doing.
So that video has gone around, been reposted a lot, very viral video. And as I've posted stuff, like I posted that meme last night, and I posted an article today, and some people are like, I know people who do drag, or I've been a bouncer for years and I know people who done drag, and no one understands why there is this obsession with integrating the drag queens with children, whether it's them coming to the schools and doing these talks, or doing drag queen story hour, or these drag family friendly events where they bring their kids there. It's all very perplexing to a lot of folks who just don't get it. And I mean, I wrote an article and posted it a few weeks ago, right before the midterm election, about, well, it was about white liberals versus minorities. There's a lot of stuff, white liberals versus minorities, that's what it's called. I'm just going to read a section of it really quickly. Though it is a good read, and I'd recommend that you go and read it. But the gist of the article is that particularly something with Prop 3 that ended up passing in my state. Um, when I would talk to people, I'm like, this is going to give like ruin consent laws for like children as far as like them being able to get abortions and who knows what else, because people were very concerned this would also lead to like gender affirmation medical treatment or whatever, if not the surgery, hormones and stuff. And people are like, no, that's not true. I'm like, well, just read the bill. And people would argue. And then I found out that the people who are pushing Prop 3, actually, as in the ACLU and Planned Parenthood Advocates of Michigan and Democrats, which a majority of House Democrats in 2019 and 2021 actually introduced legislation to try to get rid of parental consent laws regarding abortion. So I'm like, they literally tried to do it. And then people would just admit as I press it, well, I think they should be able to do without consent anyway. I'm like, so you're just arguing and gaslighting with me. Okay. Okay. But normally when I would talk to Black people about it, or just not just Black people, other minorities, they'd be like, well, that's weird. Like, I'm not for, like, they may be pro-choice, but they're not for like children doing stuff without their parents noticing, or knowing. And I'm not saying all white people were for parents not knowing or being notified, but the only people who would really passionately argue with me about it were white liberals. And so I expanded on that thinking into other spheres and also talked about the gender affirmation and the drag queen stuff. And I explained why I think that's the case. Um, Why do celebrities like Chris Evans produce content parents don't want to see and get angry for not supporting their films? The petition to put gay parents on Peppa Pig, an insanely popular children's cartoon, has the answer. The children are at an impressionable age, and progressives want to impress their values on your malleable children. Want to impress their values on your malleable children instead of yours. They find virtue in their ideology. We think drag time story hour or taking field trips to gay bars, which there's links for this stuff too. I'm not just making this up. There's actually instances of schools going to gay bars for field trips and all this other kind of stuff. We think that's perverse. For leftists, it's nirvana. Exposing their children to a male performer's flopping fake tits and spandex covered crotch is how they help their child achieve enlightenment. Christians baptize their children in water. Progressives baptize their children in sexual expression. While Christians encourage crucifying your destructive nature, progressives teach self worship and gratification. My body, my choice. It may cost you your healthy breast or even a nearly viable baby, but the pursuit of satisfying ever changing subjective truths is well worth it in the end. They believe this is love. So, I think that is their ideology in a nutshell. They really are about being lovers of themselves rather than lovers of God, if you want to put it in like a biblical perspective. That's out of uh somewhere Timothy something. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but that's actually like a verse in the Bible talking about being lovers of yourself rather than lovers of God. And they want to pursue self-worship, self-gratification, I living my truth instead of like a grounded truth that that's just reality. um it's all about your subjective world and morality not being an objective thing, something that is malleable, something that can be ever changing. And we can't build civilization on everybody doing precisely whatever they feel like, um, without any sort of protection of valuable rights. Like there's a video with this abortion activist named Bronte. I don't know her last name, and she was going back and forth with Michael Knowles, and so it was a fascinating thing to watch, I guess. It was like aggravating her answers and watching it, but I did watch the whole thing. It was like a little over 2 hours, I think. Um, and Michael Knowles just eventually asked her, like, well, where do you think rights come from? And she believed that rights essentially are just what people agree upon, like you get them from the government or something like that. And you might say, and I would say, that our rights come from our creator. Or if you don't believe in God, you just say our rights just exist from coming into being. Our right to uh to pursue happiness, our right to and pursue. No one can guarantee you. There's a reason why it's not guarantee happiness. It's pursue happiness. You can't just do anything just because you say it's gonna make you happy. And there's no guarantee that you will find happiness, but it is a pursuit, and a worthwhile pursuit. um but a right to life. If you don't think that we have an inherent like right to life just for being, then I think that causes a lot of problems, and that can explain why um it is so flimsy on their part, where it's like, well, if you wanted the baby and someone hurt your baby, then they need to go to jail. But if you want to do it yourself, then then it's all the more power to you. So he even like explained like a different conflict of rights. Like, don't you feel like right to life should supersede other stuff, because you can't actually have rights without a right to life? And she kept disagreeing. She kept saying that bodily autonomy was the most important. Like, doesn't even make sense, because you can't, because she already agreed with the premise that you can't just do anything in a society just because of your bodily autonomy. There are some limits to it, but she still kept overriding that beyond life, essentially because she wants to have this objective view of morality, and objective view of right, or not objective, I'm sorry, subjective view of rights, subjective view of morality, so she can go ahead and do whatever she wants to do. So they reject any sort of solid foundations, because they want to basically throw the whole darn table over. So I think with the trans, not that even the transgender stuff, the drag queen stuff, that has a big role as to why you see it popping up a lot. RuPaul, um, who has very much made drag queen mainstream, has a quote about why drag queens will never actually be mainstream, which is pretty interesting. But just to paraphrase, RuPaul said that drag won't ever really be mainstream because it's a mockery of everything. It's a mockery of everything, of race and gender and socioeconomic classes and everything. So RuPaul doesn't think that it can be technically mainstream, no matter how popular it gets, which I don't know about that, but or at least I that's my hope, but they're really trying, they're really, really trying. But I do believe that it is a mockery of everything. So if drag is a mockery of gender, and it is a mockery of women, the art form is. I mean, look, the garish makeup, the exaggerated kind of nature of it. Is it not a minstrel show? Is it not a minstrel show? Is it not a minstrel show? Like a crude sexual minstrel show that mocks womanhood, the woman form, all that stuff, the dress, the clothes, the makeup. Looks like a minstrel show to me from the outside. I've never been to a drag show, not going to go to one. So if you have little kids, why would you want this to be the example or something that they see to get, I don't know, any sort of teaching or worldview from? And they're like, be yourself, be fabulous. Well, there's a lot of people who can teach you be yourself. You can put on some darn kids cartoons and get those sort of messages. You don't need to turn to a drag queen. Like, invite like an author to read just like some normal kids books, or read or put on like like people always tell me like we need to do all this stuff so people can learn about inclusion. I'm like, put on Land Before Time. Let the dinosaurs teach them. Let them know that three horns can play with long necks. Like you don't need a drag queen or your non-binary I don't know, teacher or something to come in and to just spill their whole life story on these little kids so they can learn inclusion. But like I mentioned in the article, with the when they had the Peppa Pig thing, like when they had a petition like to put on gay characters in Peppa Pig as a kid show, they said that kids are malleable. They're impressionable. They want access to your kids because they want to instill their particular values into your kids. And with the drag stuff, it is about a mockery of any sort of structure on gender, and I think that's the whole entire point, to kind of upheave society. There's no other reason for it. What, just to be fabulous and teach them confidence? Again, anyone can do that, but why have people who are notoriously known for doing adult sort of performances? Don't you think that's weird? I think it's weird. I definitely think it's weird. So let me go to the quote really quick from Allie Stuckley as she talked about the drag queens coming to the White House. Now, she said, ha ha ha, LOL, all the principled conservatives and Christians who believe this bill is nothing more than a simple declaration of respect for gay marriage. How does it feel to be duped literally constantly? So that was in her reply to Libs of TikTok, letting it be known that there's at least two drag queens going to the White House. Oh, that's not the picture of them. Oh, I don't think I have the picture with both of them together. Well, one is I thought I uploaded this is not his picture in drag, but that's one of the drag performers. That is not his drag costume, but that's the photo that I had. I did have another one. I just didn't upload it, I guess. Let me get it. Was not blurred on Instagram, by the way. I blurred that. I blurred his bottom out. So these are two drag queens who were invited to the White House. Now, by the way, I've been to the White House during like the Trump administration. So usually when these things happen, I don't think that Biden got out a list of people he wanted to come the most, and he Googled them and he put their names in and said, send out the royal decree. Like that's not what happens with these sort of things. So I guess there's a chance that could have always happened, but from speaking from experience, usually there's staff or different people who are going to be invited, or officials are going to be invited, and there's lists, and people know each other, and they get people on the list of people who people might have heard about it, and they're request, like, hey, can you get me on the list? Sometimes there's people who are trying to fill up spots in the event, and they're calling, people who might be interested and know somebody, and like, hey, I'll put you on the list. But there's all kinds, because sometimes Trump White House would do things last minute and they'd be like, we need people here. Like, we need this person here, we need that person here. I've been to the White House was it twice or three times, for at least two Black History Month event things, and they were really nice. They were really, really nice. But my sister was working in DC at the time, and she knew people who worked within the administration and worked within the White House, and so she could get me on like the list to go. So yeah. So me and other family and stuff, you know somebody, they get you in, basically. So I'm not saying that Biden himself is the one who issued it. I mean, his name and stuff is on the invite, but I'm not saying that Biden specifically was like, get these drag queens here. But it speaks to the people who are around within the administration, that they're like, they want them there. So both these drag queens have been doing like drag queen story hours. So the bigger man, he actually did an event that was covered by the New York Post some time ago. There was a school, a ritzier school, that had an event at a church, and they reported it as if they were kind of forced to go. So this is Britta Filter. That's his drag name. Jesse Havara is his real name. But Britta Filter was in the news recently after the New York Post reported students at a ritzy Manhattan private school were reportedly forced to attend a drag show at a church as part of an LGBTQ plus pride celebrations earlier this year. And Britta performed Somewhere Over the Rainbow and then answered questions about performing in drag, queerness, and pride. So there's that. And this other fella here has done Drag Time Story Hour, and he disagrees with conservatives, and he's like, they're family fun events. And he's also, there's a video that's gone around of him singing Baby Shark, and Libs of TikTok, they did take a screenshot of him like getting on the table with his legs coming up spread a little bit, and that's like the still that people were passing around. He did like fold his legs, and someone was like, you're so dishonest, watch the whole video. And after I watched it, I was like, it's still gross, do 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 do. It's still gross, do 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 do. But I'll just show it really quickly, so you know the context of what I'm talking about, because I still don't find it to be very appropriate myself, but maybe perhaps you disagree. So that's the still that like Libs of TikTok had jumping on there. So I still don't find it appropriate. And someone on my Twitter page, which I've gotten some more followers the other day, and this person doesn't know me, and I'm gonna I guess put these thoughts together and more in an article, but I don't find it appropriate. One, I just to be frank, I don't like the aesthetic. If I explained particularly how I felt about it visually, I don't know, they might take my video down, so I'm not going to explain my sort of revulsion to it physically, but the aesthetic is one thing, but that's a personal thing. Why do I find it inappropriate beyond that? Because I feel that, not that I feel, drag is inappropriate for children. The costume, pantsless and the skin tight, suit and the shoes and did put his legs up and did the little spin to do the the baby shark thing on the table. The profession, the background, it's just not appropriate for the children. And like I said, drag, or like RuPaul said, drag is about mocking everything, and it is about mocking women. Now you could say it's not meant to do that in a harmful sort of way. It is still like a minstrel show. I'm not saying that I spend my nights like so offended and triggered over drag queens and putting on garish kind of makeup and dresses and whatever, and like I'm so triggered, if and like it makes me angry in a way that people would be offended by minstrel shows as a African American. I'm not saying that I have that a visceral reaction to it like that, but it is like a mockery of women. It just is. And besides that, and besides the actual like what drag queens do, where they perform, it's just not appropriate for kids. Why would you want to normalize that? Why would you want to normalize it? Well, it's a kid's like, why would you want to normalize that? Like the drag queen said at the beginning when I showed the video, would you want to bring your strippers around the kids at the, maybe some people do. Maybe some people do. Like as a continuation, as people keep advocating for sex workers' rights and all this other kind of, like, perhaps people will continue to advocate that that should be more normalized and they should have a platform to be able to speak to kids about what they do, etc. Perhaps. But it's not appropriate to mix. I mean, I don't just think it's appropriate in life anyway, but everybody knows that I'm a prude. Maybe you didn't know I am a prude. I'm a prude. I don't mind being a prude. Definitely don't mind letting people know that I'm a prude. And you can say, well, she's just a prude, and dismiss me if you want to. It's just not appropriate for kids. And I don't, well, I want to say I don't understand, but I do understand parents continuously doing this, because it would make most people scratch their heads about it. But again, these progressives see it as some kind of enlightenment for their children, because whatever you feel like your whether it's your base instincts, whatever, that is what is to be uplifted and glorified. And as we continue sort of rejecting like social norms of morality, and things get more depraved, it's going to just continuously get worse and worse and worse. Rob Smith, who is a gay black man, he's a conservative who has, by the way, he was on some kind of panel, and he mentioned it was like black Republicans, black Democrats, and he said that him coming out as conservative was was way more controversial than him actually coming out as a gay man. But he tweeted about them going to the White House, saying the Biden admin sees these far left LGBT activists as one of their new core constituencies. These are the people they need to groom America into accepting trans 5-year-olds and drag queen story hour in the name of equality. And the Biden administration, they are very into affirmation, even at a very young age. They've put out documents about affirmation, which isn't, they say that it's social affirmation, with like affirming that your child is a boy or girl, whatever that they say they are, but also chemical affirmation, physical surgical affirmation. And they've also talked about letting kids go to whatever locker rooms they want. Actually, the Biden administration, they changed Title IX. So if your school doesn't allow boys into girls' locker rooms and all the other kind of stuff, they actually are in danger of losing funds for like low-income kids for school lunch programs. So they want to continue pushing these boundaries because, well, to be frank, a lot of it has to do with uprooting social norms, including things like the nuclear family, because it is a bedrock of civilization. The more that you poke at that, the more that you destroy that and break down that, the more you break down sort of social structures that have exist because of the church, which a lot of that is community, the family, different moral structures in the nation. Then you can get more regressive and socialism, communism, etc. And I'm not really joking at all. I'm not exaggerating. If you read stuff, different writings, you'll find that out. But like a really modern example, and I go back to this all the time, is that the African American History Museum put out this whiteness graphic. And you might say, what does whiteness have to do with anything? Well, this is also like a pro communism end game sort of thing. This has to do with critical race theory. And critical race theory is tied to critical theory. All roads pretty much lead back to like socialism, communism stuff. But this infographic is one of the most racist, terrible things I've ever seen. With the different traits of whiteness. So even if you're black or something, these different traits, if you have them, it's because basically you've been infected with whiteness. And one of the things that they talk about with being something that's whiteness, and whiteness has an association of something that's bad, right? Is the family structure and the nuclear family structure. And not just the nuclear family, but also religion, like Christianity being the norm, anything that ascribes to the single God concept. So there goes all the Abrahamic faith. And anything that is like Judeo-Christian tradition. If it's not that, then it's foreign. So they consider those things to be whiteness. And there's other things in there, like being attracted to men with good jobs, being optimistic, having good work ethic, believing in like property. um there's more, and that intent counts out. That's a good one. All those things are associated with whiteness being something that you relate to being something that is bad. And they talk about needing to tear down these different structures that we have so they can build, I don't know, whatever sort of utopia that they want. But it'll never be, they're not even competent enough to build, I think, a dystopia. It'll just be a failure. Just a bunch of bricks on top of each other. I think the best it can probably get is what it is right now. As far as there's some dystopian stuff going on right now, but things will just continuously get worse. So my point is that there's all these structures in society and entities in society that want to tear down the family structure. BLM, they were inclusive for every single person except like a black father. Like when you read their What We're About page, which doesn't exist anymore, but you can like find it. But they talked about how they wanted to get rid of cisgender privilege. They talked about how they wanted to disrupt the nuclear family. Again, they're inclusive to lesbians and gays and trans people and drag queens and non-binary and all these folks. The only ones that they didn't like do a particular shout out at is like the black father, like a father figure, like being in the home. And they're not going to say that they exclude them, but they like particularly didn't mention them. As a matter of fact, in their earlier renditions of their, like when they first put out a website, I remember going to their website and they specifically said that they're going to put like trans women and queer men, or what people weren't actually using like the queer word like then back then, but they let it be known that they would prioritize certain gay men over cis men or trans men. That, like, you can still be gay, but they're still going to prioritize trans women over other black men. It's like, why can't we just care about black men or just black lives in general? Like, your website says Black Lives Matter, but there's a whole agenda beyond that. If you didn't see Candace Owens' documentary, the most interesting thing about it was probably, and you don't have to watch the whole thing, you just find a clip of it talking about how much money Black Lives Matter raised and how much they distributed particularly toward LGBT groups, which I did write an article, and you can find it at blacktnews.com about Candace does have more information than I had at the time, but it did have some links with some stuff that was in your annual reports and whatnot. But the articles, Christians were duped, like by Black Lives Matter or something like that. I think that's what the article title was. But they did send a lot of money to LGBT groups. And there's plenty of LGBT people, particularly the G and the B, and there's groups like Gays Against Groomers that don't like all this targeting toward kids. So I don't want to alienate good allies, at least in this regard. But there's an article that I also wrote about gay marriage and whether conservatives should still fight for it. And I did reference a book that was called Moving the Ball. I think it was what it is called, but came out in the 80s, 90s, and it was by a Harvard professor, two Harvard guys. One was in marketing and the other was like psychology, and they wrote about different propaganda techniques that they could have to change people's opinion on homosexuality in America, especially after the AIDS epidemic, and how they could use it to their advantage. But they talked about how they wanted to destroy the American way of life. So that's just a fact. Here's a quote. Please don't they're different agendas or propaganda techniques. One was jamming, one was they didn't say saturation, but it was like to include so much like content like everywhere that was just gay content until people were just desensitized to it. I didn't quite say that right, but you guys can gather what I was trying to say. But the third one was conversion. And the quote is, please don't confuse conversion with political subversion. By conversion, we actually mean something far more profoundly threatening to the American way of life, without which no truly sweeping social change can occur. We mean conversion of the average American's emotions, mind, and will through a planned psychological attack in the form of propaganda fed to the nation via the media. So the goal is to warp the country. So a lot of people just think it's fun, back to the drag stuff, but there is a big agenda behind it. So I know a lot of people just want to be nice or just be left alone, but I don't know, if people are silent about it, they're just going to think that the loudest voices will win. That's what it is. So if you don't like it, you gotta say that you don't. You gotta say that you don't. Anyway, moving on. I want to really quickly play this clip from Fauci. He was on Morning Show and going on and on about vaccines and stuff again. And when is this man just going to be done? Like, he's like retiring. Like, doesn't he want to be gone by the time the new Congress takes place, which they're definitely going to ask him questions. I'm sure he'll say he doesn't recall a lot of the times, but yesterday we mentioned how there were grandparents asking, should we be concerned because we're vaccinated, but our grandkids aren't concerned. And he told them that everybody should be vaccinated. So those poor parents who are probably going to be badgered because Fauci told them that everybody needs to be vaccinated when their kids are virtually safe from it. And I say virtually, not 100%. I just want to put that little disclaimer there. But here's Fauci again.
Specifics of the timing of getting a booster. So for some people, it's a third booster. For me, it would be a fourth booster. How long after having COVID? Or, for example, I got a text saying that you shouldn't get a mammogram soon after. You have to space that out. What are the things we need to know about getting that booster, and should everybody get boosted?
Well, certainly the answer to your last question, Meek, is yes, everyone should. And the timing is as follows. If you have been infected with COVID, you wait 3 months minimum to get a booster. If you have had a booster in the past, but not the updated one, the bivalent BA.4/5, you wait at least 2 months before you get the next shot. So that's the timing. That's easy. Things like avoiding a mammogram soon after you get a boost. That's really related to if you get a shot in the arm, you could have maybe an inflammation of the lymph nodes in the axilla there, and that's something you don't want to complicate the interpretation of a mammogram, but that's the only reason for that.
Dr. Fauci, good morning. Good to have you on with us. You've served seven presidents, beginning with President Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, Fauci is just a piece of work. First of all, the woman has 4 boosters or 4 shots, or man, when is enough going to be enough for some of these people? And to keep having Fauci on and just continuously encouraging the never-ending shots of the COVID.
This is a big issue of misinformation.
I did not mean to play that. Sorry if I gave you like flashbacks and aneurysms when the old press secretary came back. But to be fair, she is better than the one they have right now. When is enough going to be like enough for these folks with COVID and the jabs? And I mean, I guess they still want to push vaccines and stuff, so maybe it'll never be enough, especially since they have immunity basically with the vaccines now. So they'll keep pushing it. But something very interesting happened. DeSantis has had these panels of different experts. There's an expert on there, different people in embryology and other sort of fields to talk about vaccines and the harm that people have had from them, which I think is pretty gutsy because Florida did vaccinate a lot of people. They do have a big elderly population, and you have to look at your pros and your cons and whether it was a good thing for you to do or not do at the time. But they definitely didn't have any mandates where you had to be vaccinated. So, but anyway, he had this panel, so I was listening to it for a while. It was over an hour. I got about 30 minutes in before I had to start my show, so maybe I'll have some clips of it tomorrow to show you guys. But it's amazing listening to all these people express the harm that they've had. And I know many of these people have been silenced, and some of them talked about how they had been silenced, or there were some doctors talking about seeing the different waves or people coming in. He said by the time there was like the 3rd wave, there was a lot of people who were coming in who had like harm from COVID, but they weren't testing from COVID, and they realized it was from the vaccine. And I've heard stories from people who, I mean, one person I know had the vaccine and then they had a heart attack from like a blood clot and stuff. And one person that one of my relatives knows, a pastor, actually had to get his leg amputated after he got the vaccine. So and then I've seen heartbreaking stories of there's one a father who talked about how he got his teenage son vaccinated and he died. So weighing the risk versus reward about whether you should get vaccinated or not vaccinated, everyone should make those decisions. But it's immoral the way that they particularly push it on young people, especially if they don't have any like not adverse reaction, but comorbidities that would make it more of a necessity. And it is weird now seeing commercials popping up about kids needing to be treated for myocarditis. Not saying that it didn't need to happen before, but it's definitely not something I heard of before like COVID. And you can catch COVID and still have different complications, but that's a risk. If you're younger, why wouldn't you want to actually take that risk as opposed to actually injecting something inside of your body that could mean you harm? And some of the people who were talking about the different harm that they had, they took a first dose or a second dose and they were fine, and then they took another one and then they had really bad reactions to it. This one man who's a veteran talked about different stuff he was going through, and he kept going to the doctor and they couldn't figure it out, and they tried to say he was just stressed, and he like eventually was found out that he was like harmed from the shot. But the sort of things that he was going through and the sort of gaslighting people were putting him through, he said he was like suicidal. So we really have failed people spectacularly. And that was one thing they were talking about. So I love that Ron DeSantis had this panel to talk these things through. And some people are criticizing it and just as if they're all a bunch of crazy people getting together and just stoking misinformation. But I think we know that our experts have been pushing misinformation for a very long time and suppressing truth, lying about particular things, particularly Fauci. So to have people who have experience in the field or people who've actually been harmed to just speak about their experiences and then how we responded as a nation to the vaccines. One of the guys who was on the panel was one of the people who pushed the Great Barrington Declaration, which we've talked about before. The Great Barrington Declaration was all these epidemiologists got together and said, hey, we need to continue life, which I felt a huge relief seeing it, because I'm like, this doesn't really make any sense to me. Because if we lock down everything and we're saying, well, we need to flatten the curve, we need to slow the spread. And I'm just like, but if we slow the spread, are we just prolonging the virus? Like, like it's not going, like it's going anywhere. I'm like, we don't have a vaccine right now. So that's what I was thinking in my head. I'm like, we don't have a vaccine right now. So we're just gonna like pause on life. It's just gonna be out there like waiting for us. It wasn't just out there waiting for us. So, Andrew Cuomo at one press conference mentioned how the vaccine, like people were still getting sick, just staying home and not going to work. So I'm like, this is still like spreading regardless. Like, so why don't we like just try to isolate people with comorbidities or people who are elderly as much as possible? Let other people try to live their life, survive it if they can't. I mean, likely that they would, very likely that they would, but just try to fight through it and keep our society going. And that the people acted like you wanted people to die if you just mentioned something like that. So when I saw like there's all these other people who are like agreeing with something that I said, I'm like, not that I don't know. It just didn't seem like a crazy idea when I said it out loud. But people really acted like you wanted people to die, like you were a Grim Reaper. As a matter of fact, at one point they had a Grim Reaper walking around the beaches of Florida, people were outside. So they said we need to continue on life, protect those who are most vulnerable, and keep stuff open. Like we had a grand failed experiment, but people couldn't give it up because they got too much power. There's such a transference of wealth during the pandemic. And as soon as Trump said 15 days to slow the spread, that was basically the end of his presidency. Now, hindsight is 2020. You could say, well, if he didn't shut down the country, and people were dying, they just would have still had the counters and they still would have been coming for him and all the stuff in the news. And that's that is true. I don't know how differently things would have been if Trump never suggested like the lockdown, like the 15 days or whatever to slow the spread, because other states still could have probably tried to lock down and maybe you still would have saw different measures. So I still don't believe that he did the right thing, especially for as long as it went on. And it's tough, but as soon as that happened, that was basically the beginning of the end. It's particularly how they changed some of the rules as far as our voting and other stuff. So the mail-in ballots just killed them. And not because I think that they were fake ballots being stuffed, but just there was such pressure. People talk about voter intimidation. There was intimidation if you did not vote. And they were able to capture like the laziest, most uninformed voter. And you had like people saying, get your ballot turning right now. Get your ballot turning right now. So many people had voted even by the time they had that second debate, which was their third. It's supposed to be their third debate, but it was just ended up being their second debate. So many people had already voted by then. So it just really changed the game. I mean, Time Magazine put out an article about how they saved democracy. Like it's no secret. It really is no secret how they were able to achieve that. And but we really made a lot of mistakes. And I would like to see, every time Trump kind of talks about it, he always affirms like he did the right thing. And I would like him to admit that he didn't, I suppose. And I'm not totally blaming him with the information that he was given at the time by his advisors and different people, the experts. You know, they're telling him horrific numbers of how many people were going to die if he did not act in a particular way. So I don't have malice toward him for the decisions that he made. I don't want anyone to think that. But in hindsight, which hindsight is obviously 2020, I don't think he made the right call. But it doesn't matter. He won't admit that there were some errors. And I think if he insists that, I think that's going to end up causing him some trouble on the campaign trail, whether it's him versus DeSantis, which Trump tried to criticize DeSantis a bit about like COVID, and that's just not going to work. Whether he's up against DeSantis, or let's say Biden doesn't run and there's like a fresh faced Democrat from somewhere, and it's like Trump's policies versus someone who didn't have any authority to do what happened, they could pin a lot of stuff on Trump, including if there's a lot of stuff coming out about vaccine harm. We'll see. And I've said this before as well. This is me putting on my conspiracy theory hat for a second, but I think people, if it's possible that people just rushed the vaccine and knew that there was more harm than they were willing to admit, it could open the door. And whether this was like preconceived or something that they come up with later, because the Democrats' motto is never waste a good crisis. They could say something like, oh, well, people were harmed by the vaccines. We'll admit that. And people deserve some kind of compensation for the government. And that's why we need free healthcare. That could always be a push for the future. So I think Trump is going to have a tough time in the primary dealing with COVID questions and accountability, and and I'm not talking about the fake news like Trump said it was a hoax, which is so stupid. He did so much to claim it was a hoax. Yeah, he said it would go away, or he's trying to be optimistic, or he's, optics mean a lot. But he wouldn't have shut down the country if he didn't take it serious. And as a matter of fact, when he started to do that, people were like, no, go to Chinatown. Nancy Pelosi and all the Democrats. Not all the Democrats, but a notable number of them, prominent ones. For whatever reason. For whatever reason. I guess whatever Trump did, they had to do the opposite, until they're like, found a new game plan. Like, no, we can use this. We can really use this to destroy him and get him out the White House. Just everything was so unprecedented, including how our response to COVID, the election, everything. But yeah, it was an interesting video with DeSantis in the round table. And when you watch it, it's just kind of like, in my mind, I'm just like, here's DeSantis doing everybody's job again, because this is really something that the president Biden should be leading on, trying to assess the mistakes that were made, particularly by his administration and his tyrannical power trip, and really say, we can't afford to do this again. Not going to happen though. Not going to happen though. It'll happen if they think that they can blame it on Trump. Other than that, no. Other than that, no. Really quickly, Axios did an article about the GOP, the RNC, and whether they believe that Ronna McDaniel is going to win. And they definitely think that she is. And I had said I wouldn't bet against Ronna. Full disclaimer, I know Ronna McDaniel. She was my boss when I worked at the Michigan Republican Party. And she was my sister's boss. My oldest sister also worked with me when in the GOP, the Michigan GOP. And then she also went to the RNC. So she also worked under Ronna. And she ended up leaving the RNC to run for the Michigan Republican Party chair, which did have us at odds with the RNC chairwoman. As a matter of fact, my sister would have probably, most likely, she would have won that race if McDaniel wasn't on the floor whipping against her. So it's a long story, and I'm not going to get into it all today, but yeah. But the job of the GOP chairwoman is to raise money and to elect Republicans, and they have to have good ground game. They have to have, good support across to the nation. They target different races that are important, that where people need backup. Sometimes you'll see places that don't have support because they don't feel that it's going to go anywhere. I feel like there should be some support everywhere because everything ends up helping the top of the ticket in different places. But you can only do as much as like your staff and your resources, and you definitely need money. And so Ron has been very good at raising money, which is funny because there was like our donors in 2016 were slow to give because a lot of people didn't like Trump. But Axios is reporting Ronna McDaniel is set to glide to a fourth term as chair of the Republican National Committee next month, an unprecedented vote of confidence for a leader who has thus far failed to preside over a single positive election cycle. Now, she's been ever since Trump got elected to president. And the 2018 election, I just want to say that, I mean, we did lose it there, but there were some good races. Because I was telling my sister about the sort of rhetoric where people were talking about, and she worked at the RNC at that time, and she said she wouldn't consider 2018 to be a failure. There were some good key races where they won, one of which was Ron DeSantis in Florida, and he was not the great campaigner that he is right now. There were some issues. So he did pull it out, and there had to be like a recount or something. Had to go to Broward County. She had to go down there for something I recall. But there were some key races. Kemp won, defeated Stacey Abrams. Beto lost again. There were some good races that year, key races that we won. But did we lose control in place? Yes. But I think some of that also had to do with so many people retiring. It probably didn't need to be as bad as it was, but people were expecting such a bloodbath that you have all these Republicans start retiring and stuff. So there's a lot of races that they had to defend, and some people weren't incumbents; they were fresh face or whatever. But it wasn't as, it was really particularly bad because like California, I think there was like a wipeout. But it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I guess is the takeaway. But there were still some good key races. Midterms for like an incumbent president who just got elected, they're not always great. So of course 2020 was an issue, and we did not win that. But there were some good races for congressional candidates and people in other places. But what really didn't go well for us was the top of the ticket, with Trump not being reelected. Because some people even thought that was evidence of cheating going on because Trump wasn't reelected. They're like, this is it doesn't make any sense, because they're like, all these other people did good. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't they make it so these congressional Republicans and Republicans in other areas lost then? So at the end of the day, there's just a lot of people who didn't pull the lever, I suppose. And going into 2022, there were some really, really unfortunate Trump picks, or just bad candidates. And I'm not gonna blame everyone on Trump, but there were some key ones that he really pushed, like Herschel Walker and Mehmet Oz. And you could say, well, the Democrats would have voted for any Democrat. Well, it didn't help that Mehmet Oz didn't actually live in the state. It just didn't. And Herschel Walker was not a good candidate. If he was a better candidate, he probably would have got pulled over with Kemp, and there probably wouldn't have needed to be a runoff. just to be frank with you. Ronna McDaniel is set to glide to a fourth term as chair of the Republican National Committee next. Oh, I already read that. I'm sorry. Why it matters. With the civil war engulfing the GOP ahead of the 2024 presidential election, the RNC's membership is doubling down on Trump allied chair with a serious fundraising prowess, which a lot of it probably has to do, like her support probably has to do with how much she can fundraise and how much they've done and accomplished. She has been allied with Trump. A lot of that is strategic on her part. I think if the winds of change blows in another direction and she feels that she can go a different route, she will. And I think a lot of woes, whether you love Trump or not Trump, I thought a big mistake of the RNC was just kind of integrating so much with the Trump campaign, because they're really green. Like Trump is really green, and that's why people really like him. But not everything translates really, really well. But Trump also had some people around him who always weren't honest with him, like Brad Parscale, for example. Different data, like he was told by people like, hey, you're having a problem with suburban white women, and he get on TV and be like, our data doesn't say that. Like, no, bro, it's an issue. It's obviously an issue, and it continues to be an issue, and it's still an issue. It's still an issue. And I also didn't feel like that when we have all these Trump rallies, it'd be like, oh, there's all these people who said they were Democrats who registered for the rally, and so it's make it seem like we were going to have all this crossover support or dim exit and all this stuff happening. But the truth is, if you're on the ground and you've had to make like follow-up phone calls to a lot of people, some people register their friends or whoever for Trump rallies as a joke. And you're probably like, how many people do that? A lot. A lot of people do that. My sister had to like do follow-up phone calls to see if these people wanted to give or volunteer or whatever, or were they going to vote. And they're like, oh, I just, put my friend's name down as a joke, or that was a joke or something like that. But some people don't realize that when you register for a Trump rally, they're just collecting your data. When you show up, they're not checking your tickets or anything usually like that. They don't have a seat reserved for you unless you're like VIP. If you're waiting in line, like most people for hours to get into the Trump rally, there's no guarantee that you're actually even going to get in there. Because there might be too many people or whatever. It just depends what time you get in line. But they're not saving you a seat because you registered online. All that is like to collect data, to collect information. So some people actually believe that if they register, that they will reserve those spots, and then all these Trump people won't be able to get in, and there will be empty seats. That's what people who are unaware of the process, who are looking at stuff on Twitter and they're trying to sabotage Trump, are like, oh, I will register, or I'll have these fake names, or I'll put my name, or put my friend's name, or whatever, not intending to actually go to the actual rallies. So there could be all kinds of different explanations to why people put their name down or put someone else's name down, but and say that they're Democrat or whatever. But that doesn't mean that there was going to be this surge. So I think it made people very overconfident, and they wanted to, live it up and make the numbers seem like they were higher than what they were. And I understand that maybe that makes people more excited to give or something, but ultimately I think you have to be honest about where things are and where you need to, because people need to know what they need, what they're working with, and where they need to go. But the person who was going to challenge, or people wanted to challenge, was Lee Zeldin, who didn't win in New York, but ran a good race. But he decided not to do it. And California attorney Harmet Dillon and MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell said that they were going to run. Mike Lindell was non-starter, but some people were very excited about this attorney running. I know Ben Shapiro mentioned, that she helped with his lawsuit against the Biden administration and that he supports her. But how the RNC is set up, it really is a field that benefits incumbents. That's what Sean Spicer said. And so it's just not going to be easy for someone to come in because they just need 85 votes. There's these activists, some of them have been there for a while, get reelected several times, of these RNC committee people. You go to like a GOP convention and you elect your committee people, and there's committee women from all over the country, and they cast their votes. So Ronna had all these people who had already pledged, and they sent around another letter with more people on it. So it doesn't look like she's lost support. Now, if they're doing like secret ballots, it could just be a lie and she could get, shellacked. But I don't think that's going to happen. I like I said, I didn't think that, I wouldn't bet against Ronna winning this. And will she do it another term? There's rumors that she wants to run for governor in Michigan. So if that's her aspiration, maybe perhaps she just wanted to stay busy until that time, I guess. I don't know. Which I got some thoughts about that, but that we can save those for another day. But yeah, I think she's gonna win this. Now she could always not, but I wouldn't bet against her with this. And it looks like she basically has it wrapped up. But the RNC, the big race that they're going to be focused on is going to be the presidential race. And they're going to have to change up their strategies and their ground games and rebuild their absentee mail-in program, which they did have a really good one in like 2016 and before that and stuff. But Trump did like kill it, just to be frank, in 2020 with his talk of the mail. They're going to have to ballot harvest and do different things like Democrats are doing to try to run the game, vote early, like they vote early. And, because in Arizona, everybody waiting on election day and all these machines freaking out. I don't know if it cost Carrie Lake her election, but like Abe, who was the attorney general candidate, probably cost him his election because he only lost by like 500 votes. That's very close. It's very close. Very close. Which Carrie Lake is contesting the results, though. I don't. Just to be frank, I don't think that's going to go anywhere. But that sucks for the AG candidate. It really does. But Axios also pointed out winning the RNC chairmanship is about catering to the interest and the whims of at least 85 members, all of whom have agendas that go beyond simply advancing the interests of the Republican Party. What I hear, not just from RNC members, but from elected officials, is that RNC doesn't matter anymore. Erickson told Axios, noting that the committee man's priority in the Trump era is fundraising for presidential campaigns. The Republican Governors Association, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and the National Republican Congressional Committee matter way more than the RNC. There's no reason to spend capital trying to boot McDaniel out when it's not really a relevant factor at this point. So that's interesting. The Governors Association, all those other organizations do really matter and are really important. Like in Michigan, they didn't pour in money to like Tudor Dixon to the very last minute. The very last minute. But hopefully they change things up and they do some ground game stuff, and they get some good data talking to people on the ground and not just people who want to tell them things that they want to hear. Or there's even instances sometimes when they'll pay vendors last minute to look like they're doing something. Like, have a good strategy 24/7, 365 days a year to grow the base. But as far as her being a Trump allied person, again, I think Ronna will do whatever is strategic. So if the wind isn't blowing with Trump, I think things could get nasty between the two of them really quick. So that's my 2 cents. Really quickly, last thing I want to mention, because I am over, but Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested, which I saw so many interviews with him, and I'm like, I think he thinks that he's going to get away with what he did, being basically the cryptocurrency Bernie Madoff kind of person. I thought he thought that he was going to get away with it, and I think he's actually said that he didn't think he was going to get arrested the day he got arrested. Now, some people, when I mentioned that he had got arrested, they mentioned that he was supposed to testify in front of Congress, and he got arrested so he wouldn't have to testify in front of Congress. So that is interesting. Perhaps it is true, and that it was timed in such a way. Who knows? But one thing that is really interesting about this so-called genius is that he had a group chat with other people called fraud, like wire fraud. Like, why would you have that kind of trail? I don't understand. It boggles my mind what people put down in different chats. It kills me. It kills me. It doesn't make sense. I'm going to read a little bit of this article from T Post Millennial. Authorities have filed criminal charges against Democrat megadonor FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried. A statement from Attorney General of the Bahamas confirms police of the Bahamas have taken SBF into custody one day before he was set to provide a digital testimony to the U.S. Congress. He claimed he didn't want to actually go before the Congress because he didn't want to. He claimed paparazzi or something. Perhaps he was concerned that he would be arrested. I don't know. And he was just trying to hide out in the Bahamas because he didn't think he'd be arrested. Who knows? The statement from the office of Senator Ryan Pinder confirms the arrest of Bankman-Fried, not Fried. On 12th of December 2022, the Office of the Attorney General of the Bahamas is announcing the arrest by Royal Bahamas Police Force of Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, former CEO of FTX. SBF's arrest followed the receipt of a formal notification from the United States that it has filed criminal charges against SBF and is likely to request his extradition. As a result of the notification received and the material provided therewith, it is deemed appropriate for the Attorney General to seek SBF's arrest and hold him in custody pursuant to our nation's Extradition Act. At such time as formal request of extradition is made, the Bahamas intends to process it promptly pursuant to the Bahamian law as its treaty obligations for the United States. Responding to SBS's request, Prime Minister Davis stated the Bahamas and the United States have shared interest in holding accountable all individuals associated with FTX who may have betrayed the public trust and broken the law. While the United States is pursuing criminal charges against SBF individually, Bahamas will continue its own regulatory and criminal investigations into the collapse of FTX with the continued cooperation of the law enforcement and regulatory partners of the United States and elsewhere. Bankman-Fried was set to appear before the House Financial Services Committee on Wednesday. U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Damian Williams, said that the Bahamian authorities arrested Bankman-Fried at the request of the U.S. government based on a sealed indictment filed by the SDNY. We expect to move to unseal the indictment in the morning, and we'll have more to say at the time. He tweeted on December 9th, I still do not have access to much of my data, professional or personal, so there is a limit to what I will be able to say, and I won't be as helpful as I'd like. But as the committee still thinks it would be useful, I am willing to testify on the 13th. So SBF is central to the reported $2 billion to $8 billion of FTX customers' funds that vanished in early November. He then filed his company for bankruptcy. Bankman-Fried was the second biggest Democrat donor following only George Soros in 2021 to 2022, contributing $39.8 million. So we will see what happens. Yeah, someone said Maxine Waters was blowing him kisses. Yeah, he was. So some people saying that he got arrested so he wouldn't testify. He's been giving interviews like crazy. So maybe some people in the committee were like, we'd rather get rid of him or whatever for him to come and testify. But I don't know. So a lot of these people would have protected him, and it seemed like we're willing to protect him. So Maybe, maybe not. I like a good conspiracy. The timing is interesting. Um, and it is interesting that he wasn't arrested earlier, because I'm like, why? And why does he keep talking? Why does he keep going on TV shows? Why does he keep doing interviews? Why is he at this big event with all these other world leaders and speakers talking they know he committed this big fraud? And some people are like, well, did he commit a crime? I'm like, yes, he committed at least wire fraud. This, they were taking funds from customers to pay off debts of his girlfriend's company and other stuff like that. So, and talking, having a chat called wire fraud, it was just mind blown. So it's a developing story. We continue to talk about it. I don't know much about cryptocurrency, but it is a fascinating story. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on the website, different articles that I have on there, different videos that I have as well. Make sure that you check out some stuff on YouTube. I just posted a segment about Jennifer Lawrence and her whole first action hero star thing. So make sure when you're on YouTube that you're also hitting notification for your subscriptions. A lot of people subscribed after a viral short video that I had, and I don't know why they don't notify people if they subscribe. YouTube is so weird, and just because we know that Twitter has suppressed other people and that's come out, we suspect that they're suppressing other people. I do think I'm being suppressed, but you just got to hit the notification bells, checking on folks that you like, make sure that you guys are going to the website, putting in your emails so you're aware of different stuff that other people are doing that you follow. Make sure that you guys check out different merch on the site, like this Denounce White Supremacy, Defeat Joe Biden shirt with a list of some of his racist stuff on the back. I'm not the victim you're looking for, and all sorts of goodies as well. God bless you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.